Chief mocked the car washer, calling him an uneducated idiot. The washer quit. And 7 years later, the boss comes to the bank for a loan for his sick daughter's operation. The man walked into the car dealership as usual, shoulders squared, a confident stride across the shiny floors, savoring the scent of new cars. People always viewed him as successful and wealthy. He was indeed such, presenting to the world only the mask of a proud, self-assured person who had achieved everything one could dream of. His dealership was the most prestigious in town, frequented by affluent clients seeking expensive cars. He could do it all. Get a rare model? Easily. Customize a car with a unique color? No problem. Orizio could fulfill any request. The only requirement was that the buyer had the money, everything else was secondary. He knew his employees didn't like him much. He understood they saw him as a cruel and arrogant boss. To some extent, he was, but he knew that his life, though seemingly beautiful and carefree, wasn't as bright as it seemed. There was a time when he could boast not only success and wealth, but also a beautiful wife. Selina was his muse, his inspiration, his pillar, and the love of his life, the mother of their charming daughter, Eve. However, he lost Selina in a foolish yet cruel accident. Orizio remembered that day as if it were yesterday. They were celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary. They had left their daughter with Selina's mother, Gabriella. After a long walk and a pleasant evening at the city's most expensive restaurant, Selina volunteered to drive their car. A storm caught them midway, turning the road into a slippery surface in an instant. If Orizio hadn't distracted his wife, caressing her thigh, she might have handled the car. One moment she laughed at his caresses, the next they were flying off the road, tumbling and crashing the car through the vegetation on the slope. Orizio survived, bruised and scratched. Selina did not. Since then, he had been alone with his daughter. Gabriella, Selina's mother, didn't abandon the widower. She took on the upbringing of her granddaughter, allowing Orizio to work for the benefit of their small family. But after his wife's death, he hardened, became cynical, distracted only by indulging his daughter with any whim or even the most expensive gifts, reminding him so much of his wife. He became tougher in business, strict with his employees. Perhaps it was because of his wife's death that he lost the ability to enjoy life and began to perceive the world through the lens of loss. It became incredibly difficult to surprise him, and he stopped considering how his actions or words might harm others. Slacking off again, "You damn lazy bum," barked Orizio as he passed by one of his employees. This young man was just a simple car washer, cleaning and polishing floors to a shine, buffing cars, ensuring all displayed vehicles were spotless for visitors. His stern, albeit youthful, face always irked Orizio. The man couldn't even recall the washer's name. What difference did it make? A washer was a washer. He didn't care what they were called. He was just another rank-and-file employee, often changing nearly every month. Today one, tomorrow another, the day after a new one. So why bother remembering names? His indifference was reinforced by the prestige of the car dealership. There were always long queues of applicants for various positions. He had seen so many resumes, and would see even more. "Don't look at me, idiot. Look here." Orizio marched up to the washer and jabbed a finger at the hood of an incredibly expensive car, leaving smudges on the freshly polished surface. "You missed a spot. Fix it quick. First customers will be here soon." The washer said nothing, glowering at the owner as he dutifully wiped away the marks left by his boss. Orizio headed to his office, feeling irritated. Every time he saw this washer, his teeth ground with hatred. This anger arose spontaneously, without any particular reason, but Orizio couldn't help but find fault with this young man. The washer seemed diligent and hardworking. All cars in the showroom were always polished to a mirror shine. The floors were immaculate as if in an operating room. He always arrived on time, never late, and left promptly after work. One might wonder, why pick on such a perfect employee? But it was precisely the washer's flawless work that irked Orizio. The pampered dealership owner devised ways to nitpick at this young man. It became a strange, daily amusement for him. He found non-existent spots and streaks where there were none, using it as an excuse to lash out at the young worker. Every day, he insulted the washer again and again, as if it were the only thing that allowed Orizio to smile. He comforted himself with the thought that he had the right to insult anyone beneath his social status, and he considered most people around him to be such. After all, he held 3 advanced degrees, not just from anywhere, but from the world's top universities. And therefore, he despised anyone with diplomas from local colleges, such as the washer working in his dealership. In Orizio's opinion, this young man was not worthy of any different treatment. This day proceeded routinely in every sense and passed swiftly, papers demanding his attention, incredibly tasty coffee, his personal assistant flirting with him again without evoking even a hint of reaction from Orizio. The man quickly grew tired and headed away. His remaining work could be handled by his employees, including those closing the car dealership for the night. Passing by the car washer, Orizio once again felt irritation rising within him. "You idiot, who taught you to hold a rag?" Orizio barked. "How were you even hired here, you clueless head? What is this? I'm asking you, what is this? Quickly mop the floors and don't you dare slack off. Get to work, I say. And don't you dare leave until everything's fixed." The washer remained silent as usual, glowering at the car dealership owner, and picked up the mop that had just been set aside after finishing mopping the floors. If not for the boss, who had walked across the still damp floor in dirty shoes, everything would have been fine. Orizio walked away, not even considering that his employee had been contemplating quitting for more than a day. He no longer had the strength to endure the constant attacks. Even the most patient and restrained person could have long ago snapped at this arrogant and uncompromising boss. The washer, Hector, ground his teeth as he scrubbed away the dealership owner's footprints, knowing it was time to bid farewell to this job. He had worked so long and steadfastly at this place, outlasting most other employees, that to everyone else he seemed the only constant worker besides Orizio at the prestigious car dealership. The next day, it all repeated once more. Orizio arrived at work smiling and content until he saw Hector. The young man diligently wiped off another streak on the windshield of a newly installed car in the showroom, preparing it for visitors. The brand new business class model gleamed under the lights, but Orizio grimaced at the sight of Hector meticulously wiping away invisible marks from the car. The dealership owner swiftly approached Hector. "How many times do I have to teach you to do your job?" Orizio shouted at him. "Do you need to wave a rag around a lot? Enough slacking off, you idiot. Let's go. Polish it. And do it thoroughly this time, so there won't be any more of these streaks." The man ran his fingers over the car, leaving prints on the freshly polished surface. Hector, as always, stayed silent, watching him go with a glare. Orizio entered his office and slumped into his chair, getting down to business. His mood improved slightly, reprimanding the car washer once again made him feel important. Less than an hour passed before Hector walked into his office. "And what are you doing?" Orizio snapped at the young man. "Get back to the showroom quickly and mop the floors. I can see from here that they're all filthy." The washer silently placed a document on the boss's desk and headed out without uttering a word. Frowning, the car dealership owner picked up the paper and irritably looked at it. It turned out to be a filled-out resignation form. "You've decided to quit?" Orizio laughed. "Who needs you? You'll come crawling back to me begging for your job again. You've been an idiot and you still are. You can't even properly wave a rag and wipe off stains." Insults continued to fly at Hector's back as he quietly gathered his things and left the car dealership where he had faithfully worked for so many years, putting in his utmost effort and keeping everything in pristine condition. Orizio laughed about it for the rest of the day. By the next day, everyone had forgotten they ever had a diligent worker who quietly did his job and endured the boss's attacks. For the car dealership owner, it seemed like everything had settled down. There was nothing else to distract or irritate him. Though, of course, the self-satisfied man still found fault with other employees, but he shouted much less now that the quietest lad in the showroom was no longer working there. But life is never that simple. One day, Orizio's daughter, Eva, returned from a long overseas trip where she had celebrated combined festivities with some of her friends. Orizio knew it was someone's birthday and a close friend of his daughter's had gotten engaged. Though Eva was a student, at that moment she was without duties, which was supposed to start only in a month. And Orizio easily let his daughter go on a long vacation. Everything was as usual. The girl boasted about her rest, shared impressions and photos, talked about how well she had spent her time and what new dishes she had managed to try on her trip. Only day passed, and Eva seemed to be fading away before our eyes. First, an incredible weakness and dizziness appeared. Then Eva suddenly lost her appetite, and her stomach twisted from any food, even the lightest. "Don't worry so much, Orizio," reassured businessman Gabriella. "Granddaughter just returned from another country, probably caught a cold, that's all." Orizio didn't intervene, trusting the more experienced woman in terms of child rearing. After all, she loved her granddaughter and wouldn't wish her harm. "She's been eating fruits and vegetables for almost a month, don't worry," Gabriella lamented the next day, once again clearing away Eva's untouched dinner portion. Orizio was grateful Gabriella lived with them, watching over Eva, as he spent too much time at work. "If anything changes, let me know," Orizio replied. "Of course, son, do you think I'd keep you in the dark? Don't worry, everything will be fine soon. I'll make soup, and you'll see, Eva will recover." But time passed, and Gabriella found more excuses: stress from starting school, climate change, magnetic storms. But once, when they were preparing to dine together, Orizio saw his daughter stagger towards the table. "Dad." Eva sounded very weak and couldn't say more. She collapsed to the floor. Orizio and Gabriella rushed to her, but she seemed so pale and unresponsive to their pleas to wake up that Orizio picked her up and rushed to the car. The trip to the hospital didn't take long. There, in the emergency room, an endless whirlwind of tests, results, and doctors' examinations began. "Don't worry." Orizio tried to cheer up Gabriella, equally worried about their granddaughter. "Maybe it's just a hormonal imbalance, and they'll give her some pills, and that's it." But it wasn't that simple. Orizio spared no expense and pressured the doctors to use every available means to get one single answer. Distraught, Orizio nearly fainted upon hearing his daughter's final diagnosis. Without Gabriella, he might have been in shock for a long time. A rare disease requiring extensive medical intervention could be fatal for the girl. Orizio's life turned upside down. His usual confidence and sense of authority were gone. He became gloomy, lost in thoughts and worries. At work, he snapped and seemed more cruel than ever before. The employees of the car dealership began to avoid him, just to avoid getting in his way. If before they feared his anger, now they were afraid of him because the man could fire anyone without any reason. The dealership staff speculated about what had happened to their boss, but rumors were flying until one gossipmonger revealed the true reason behind Orizio's intensified cruelty. "Did you hear?" Local gossip Lavrentia chirped during lunch break with her colleagues. "His daughter got sick. She's in the hospital right now." "Seriously? Is that why he's like this?" responded Lorenzo, a top car sales leader. "Well, you think? He's usually strict enough, but not this nervous. My cousin told me about it. She's a nurse at the hospital. His daughter, Eva, got admitted with some illness. They say it's serious and requires long-term treatment. The diagnosis is bleak." "Poor girl," sighed another woman who worked in accounting. "Not only does she have a father with such a bad temper, now this illness." "Oh, who cares about them?" scoffed the car salesman, sipping his strong coffee. "They're swimming in money like it's nothing. Orizio will pay for the treatment, and everything will be back to normal. You'll see." No one dared to speak directly to Orizio, enduring his outbursts and attributing it all to his concern for his only daughter. Meanwhile, Orizio tried to carry on, balancing visits to his hospitalized daughter with work. Despite his efforts, over time, the business began to decline gradually. He started giving up, once he had enough physical and mental strength to be successful in his business, but now the care of his daughter took precedence, and Orizio gradually withdrew from managing the dealership. He delegated many responsibilities to others, without considering whether they were ready for the extra load. These decisions led to new problems arising. Perhaps he could have managed it all, but life threw him another curveball. An anonymous tip-off to the tax authorities resulted in the dealership being closed for a thorough inspection. As it turned out, during his daughter's illness, Orizio completely neglected his business and the employees responsible for things like taxes and other payments. The burden shifted onto other employees, who couldn't keep up with the mounting paperwork. This blow to the dealership led to Orizio's accounts being frozen, and almost all of his savings were used to settle the debts uncovered during the inspection. But the man wasn't thinking about any of this. His main concern was Eva. His daughter urgently needed surgery. If up until this point Orizio could easily find the necessary funds for something like this, now he felt uneasy. The car dealership was barely staying afloat, and the exorbitant sum required for the surgery seemed incredible and unattainable. On another evening, sitting at the dinner table, the man struggled to eat the meal prepared by Gabriella. Eva's grandmother always found the strength not only to support her granddaughter by visiting her in the hospital, but also to support her father, who was doing his utmost to fix everything but clearly was beginning to despair. Orizio, don't lose hope. The Lord is testing you, but it's not a reason to give up. Eva needs us. Gabriella urged him, equally concerned for her granddaughter as Orizio himself. The Lord is testing me enough. Orizio snapped, feeling drained. Selena died, leaving me alone with Eva, and now Eva is facing death from some damn illness. And all these problems with the tax authorities. If the dealership could operate like before, there would be money for treatment. Gabriella understood his frustration and didn't take offense at his tone. Don't lose hope. Selena is watching over us from heaven. She will surely watch over Eva and won't let her perish. I remember how much she loved both of you. She won't let Eva suffer for long. Believe in her. Believe. Orizio would have been glad to believe in God and the idea that Eva's mother was watching over them from heaven, and in the hope that everything would work out. But life seemed so overshadowed by what was happening that he no longer knew what to believe in. When visiting Eva in the hospital, he still tried to appear cheerful and confident, but seeing his daughter pale and weak, Orizio couldn't help but feel despair in his heart. The girl seemed to be wasting away before his eyes, turning into a frail skeleton. With all the problems that had arisen, Orizio knew he had no choice but to turn to the bank for a loan. There was no other way he could accumulate the necessary amount for the surgery to help his beloved daughter. Her health was more important to him than anything else. Neither the business, nor the mansion, nor the cars, most of which he had sold to pay the hospital bills, none of it evoked the same sense of attachment as before. Only Eva, so much like her mother, was the most important person in his life. We'll get through this, Orizio. Everything will be fine. Gabriella continued to reassure him. The man knew how deeply she worried for her granddaughter and was grateful for her support during this difficult period in their lives. If it weren't for her, Orizio might have despaired so much that he wouldn't have been able to endure these circumstances. I hope so, Orizio replied to Gabriella. Tomorrow, I'm going to the bank to apply for a loan, pray that they approve it. I won't be able to handle it if they refuse. I'll pray. And I'll pray for Eva too. Nodded Gabriella. And for you, I'll pray. The Lord sees how hard you're trying. Orizio didn't respond, grimly preparing everything for his visit to the bank. As he packed documents into his briefcase, he knew he would have to pledge the remaining assets just to get his request considered, but he wasn't as confident of a positive outcome as Gabriella was. The man understood that the bank was a soulless machine focused solely on profit. What profit could he offer? The next morning, at the bank, Orizio almost winced at the chaos inside. He had forgotten what it was like to be among ordinary people asking for a loan. It was a hot day, and the cramped bank was incredibly stuffy due to the number of people crammed inside for their own purposes. Orizio, already sullen and nervous, grew even darker with each passing moment. Clients absorbed in their problems, employees smiling sweetly while eager to earn more money for the bank. Orizio couldn't help but think of how many false promises were made just to convince poor souls who spent their entire lives working various jobs to accept terms and offers that were clearly disadvantageous to them. Glancing around at the busy people, Orizio suddenly felt a strange sense of tension. Something wasn't right. He began to scrutinize the people, and finally, he saw a face that was painfully familiar. Of all the people not to see here, Orizio muttered. As much as he had despised this person before, finding the slightest reason to insult the car washer, now he had no time for that at all. During the time he had not been working for Orizio, the young man seemed to have become much better. Dark circles under his eyes had disappeared, his grim look, pallor, and slight stoop were gone. That's why Orizio didn't recognize him at first. Now the former car washer looked taller, with shoulders proudly straightened, a tan and well-rested face, and a sparkle in his brown eyes. In addition, he had become fit and had a new haircut, making him look barely older than Orizio's daughter. The car dealership owner didn't want to meet with him at all, but the young man approached him on his own. Not the best day to be at the bank, huh? Hector joined his former boss. Not the word for it, Orizio replied darkly. I hope everything's okay with you. You don't seem quite yourself. Orizio grimaced. Nothing is okay. The man struggled to recall the name of his former employee. Hector, I don't have time for you. The young man frowned. Don't despair. Everything can be overcome. Difficulties build character and give us the opportunity to show our best selves. What do you know about such things? Orizio retorted. Quite a bit. I worked for you for so many years, endured your attacks, but you have no idea how much they helped me by subjecting me to that stress. During my time at your dealership, I learned a lot and saved up enough money to start my own business. And what did you manage to start? Orizio could barely muster anything to say to the young man in response to such a declaration. My own car wash service. At first, it was tough washing cars alone. I did what I could, but patience and hard work paid off, and I gradually began to expand. I eventually hired employees, rented an office, and stocked up on everything needed. Hector shook his head. So, everything can be overcome, everything can be fixed. The key is to not lose hope and not give up. And what are you doing here then? Orizio asked. I've decided to expand even further. I'm thinking of opening a network of high-quality car washes. And believe me, the quality we offer is incredibly high. You taught me to work meticulously and with quality. For that, I'm immensely grateful to you. So, you're here to take out a loan to expand your car wash. Orizio sighed. I'm happy for you. He didn't know what else to say to Hector. The young man had become more cheerful and composed, clearly satisfied with the positive change in his life. Orizio sadly thought about his sick daughter. Would he ever see her smile again? Would they approve the loan for her operation? Would his little girl ever recover? And what brings you to the bank? Hector asked cautiously. Is it something to do with the dealership? Not just that. The dealership is barely staying afloat, that's true, but that's not why I'm here. What happened? A lot has happened, Hector. I owe taxes, which wiped out all my savings. But that's not important. There are more serious matters in life. More cruel problems. Oh? Hector was surprised by Orizio's words, accustomed to hearing something completely different from him. Were the once important matters of money and the car dealership suddenly not so important to the man? Something must have strongly influenced him, prompting him to change priorities in life. I don't even know if they'll approve my loan, Orizio continued. I'm ready to put up everything I have left. And I really need the money. The situation is too dire to get through this without funds. Why do you need the money? Hector inquired. My daughter. The car dealership owner sighed heavily. My Eva, she's in the hospital. Hector was surprised. It was the first time he had learned that Orizio had a daughter. What happened? The young man asked. At first, we thought it was nothing. Just a cold, a change in climate after her long vacation abroad. Orizio's voice trembled. We thought it would pass. Then she collapsed, and we rushed her to the hospital. Since that night, she's been lying there. The doctors ran so many tests that all my remaining funds went to consultations with the best specialists. We found out what's wrong, but now we need money for surgery. Without it, Eva won't survive. And I've run out of money. I've spent it all. That's why I'm here. Hector sat silently beside him, trying to think of something to say to Orizio, but he didn't even manage to open his mouth. The speaker crackled to life, announcing that it was his turn, and he should approach a specific counter. Everything will be all right. Hector patted his former boss on the shoulder, rising from the couch where they had been sitting and talking. Orizio didn't respond, lost in his thoughts. He took out a photograph from his breast pocket and looked at the image taken shortly before his wife's death. He looked at Selena's happy face, at his laughing, still very young daughter sitting on his shoulders, and his own joyful face. Tears welled up in his eyes, and Orizio irritably wiped them away. He sat there, remembering that day, his heart aching with pain. The man didn't know how much time had passed when suddenly someone stopped in front of him. He looked up and saw Hector extending a nondescript package to his former boss. The ex-car washer's face was calm, but in his eyes, Orizio saw something akin to genuine sympathy. A surge of irritation washed over Orizio immediately, and his face flushed with anger and indignation. Did he, a prominent businessman who was not an insignificant figure in the capital, need help from some washed-up car washer? But the young man didn't say anything, shrugged his shoulders, and placed the package next to Orizio before walking away. The man wanted to rush after him, but hesitated, his hands shaking with indignation, nearly dropping the package left by Hector. By the time he dashed out onto the sun-drenched street, the car washer and any trace of him had vanished. Oh, you empty-headed fool, the businessman cursed himself. What a complete idiot you are, Hector. Unable to locate his former employee, Orizio accepted his defeat and returned to the bank, postponing resolution of this matter for later. However, the money left by Hector came in handy. Ultimately, the bank denied the businessman's loan request, dissatisfied with the collateral he offered. Orizio was infuriated by the insincere, sympathetic smiles of the bank staff, but he couldn't do anything about it. He knew that causing a scene wouldn't help Eva. Forced to use the funds provided by the car washer, Orizio paid for his daughter's surgery, and finally, she began to recover. The following year passed in a haze. Orizio rejoiced as Eva gradually regained her health. Despite a difficult post-operative period and some related issues with medications, nothing seemed as challenging as the illness that had hospitalized her. Each new day brought new problems, but they faced them with hope. After all, the worst was behind them. The man delighted in seeing his daughter smile again, her pale face adorned with a healthy glow, and her eyes shining once more. Witnessing positive changes in his daughter, Orizio couldn't help but feel grateful towards Hector. He berated himself for his past treatment of the former car washer, who had silently endured his unfair attacks while working at his dealership. Ashamed of this, Orizio promised himself to change and not repeat such mistakes, which could affect not only his dealership but himself as well. After all, Hector had no obligation to help a former boss who had mistreated him for years. Orizio was already rejoicing in the valuable lesson Hector had taught him, promising to someday repay the young man with similar kindness. For now, however, life was improving for him. Month after month, Eva grew stronger, no longer reliant on pills and medicines. Visits to the doctors became less frequent, and those visits brought smiles, confirming that Eva was finally completely healthy. Forced to take a leave of absence from her studies during her illness, Eva returned to university and successfully completed her education. Orizio was proud of his daughter. She not only stayed strong during her illness, but also endured everything that followed the surgery. Moreover, she managed to graduate as one of the top students in her class. On that day, they were heading to the graduation ceremony, and Eva laughed, rejoicing in her achievements and anticipating the future prospects ahead of her. She chatted about her dreams, and Orizio couldn't help but delight in his daughter, fully understanding that everything would be all right now. "Oh, Dad." Eva clapped her hands together. "We were supposed to wash the car before the ceremony." "That's right." Orizio glanced at his wristwatch and realized they had plenty of time, as they had left much earlier than necessary. He turned into a car wash adorned with a beautiful sign, and several employees immediately took their car. Orizio and Eva headed to the office to pay for the services and wait for their car to be ready. Suddenly, Orizio heard a painfully familiar voice and turned sharply, seeing a handsome, tall young man holding a wooden tablet with a stack of papers on it. Without a doubt, it was Hector. Orizio felt a surge of emotions and didn't know whether to shout, rejoice, or reprimand the man for giving him the money for his daughter's surgery. "Dad?" Eva nudged her father's elbow. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "That's exactly," her father murmured. Orizio swallowed hard, trying to gather his thoughts, and saw Hector finishing a conversation with his employees and turning towards them. Upon seeing his former boss, the young man smiled, but when Eva stepped out from behind the businessman's back, Hector's smile widened even more. On unsteady legs, Orizio approached the young businessman and without a moment's hesitation, enveloped him in a tight embrace. "Hector, if you only knew how much you've helped me," Orizio said with tears in his eyes, not letting go of the young man. "I am so grateful to you. I owe you so much." "Oh, come on, it was nothing." Hector tried to brush it off. Finally stepping back, Orizio shook his head. "It was far from nothing. You saved my daughter's life. My Eva." "Hi." The girl smiled, not understanding why her father was so agitated upon seeing the car wash owner. "I'm Eva." "Hector," the young man shook the offered hand. "Nice to meet you." "Oh. So you're the guardian angel my dad was telling me about?" Hector chuckled awkwardly, scratching the back of his head and glancing at Orizio, who seemed incredibly happy to see him. "Oh, come on, guardian angel." Hector waved it off. "I just helped out where I could." "Don't downplay your contributions, Hector." Orizio nodded at the young man. "You saved us, even though you didn't have to. Without a doubt, you were sent by God himself. I couldn't just walk away and leave you in trouble, Orizio. My mother raised me to be a good and compassionate person. She always said we should help people in need. And although we had tense relations in the past, if it weren't for your lessons, I would never have started my own business." "Tense relations?" Eva looked at her father, crossing her arms over her chest and frowning. "Dad, you never told me about this." Orizio awkwardly scratched his head. "Well, Hector used to work at my car dealership," he said. "He was a car washer and cleaned the halls. Forgive me, Hector. I treated you unfairly." Hector shook his head with a smile. "Oh, that's all in the past, Orizio. Let's forget about it. If it weren't for how you guided me, I wouldn't have had the patience and perseverance to overcome all the challenges of starting my own business. Your attitude instilled patience and resilience in me, which is incredibly important when facing various problems at the beginning of the journey. My dad was always strict." Eva sighed. "But I had no idea what was really going on." "It's all in the past, Miss Eva," Hector waved it off. "It doesn't matter now. The main thing is that you are alive and well, and the rest doesn't matter." The young man became even more flustered when he saw the girl smile. Never before had he felt so thrown off balance. It was as if lightning had struck him, shaking him so much that he suddenly lost all his confidence. It wasn't just the beauty of the girl that struck him, but the lively eyes filled with life, her thirst for living and finding joy in each day after everything she had been through. This sincere desire to see beauty in the world after trials was something not everyone possessed, and that's what attracted Hector the most. "Dad, you do agree we can't let his kindness go unrewarded, right?" Eva nudged her father's side. Orizio looked at his daughter. "And what do you suggest?" The girl laughed. "Why don't we invite him to dinner?" Her father smiled. "Why not? Great idea. Hector, you mustn't refuse our invitation." The young man truly couldn't resist Eva's charming smile. That same evening, he listened spellbound as she enthusiastically talked about her dreams, not only to work in her chosen field, but also to help people, just as Hector had done without hesitation when he helped her father. Hector couldn't take his eyes off her, and Orizio smiled, understanding that these two had found common ground, not just because the young man had helped pay for the girl's operation when it was so desperately needed. In the passionate gaze of the former car washer, Orizio saw admiration and budding love. In some ways, he reminded the man of himself when he met Selena many years ago. From that day, Orizio and Eva's lives took a turn for the better. Hector and Eva began dating, and Orizio couldn't have been happier. He couldn't have dreamed of a more worthy son-in-law. The man became more cheerful and confident, as if he had never experienced despair when everything in life went awry. Gradually, he restored his auto dealership to its former glory, paid off all his debts, and even expanded, opening new showrooms in neighboring cities. He kept a close eye on his business, no longer allowing himself to miss reports or tax payments, to avoid a situation that nearly closed down his creation forever. His collaboration with Hector also played its part, and together they expanded their business, celebrating each other's successes. Orizio stopped being as harsh at work, and employees began to stay longer in his company. Now there were no resignations due to Orizio's bad temper, which used to provoke outbursts against his employees. Meanwhile, Eva was glad to see her father becoming more joyful and gentle, more often revealing his better side. Whereas before he grumbled at his employees, who constantly slacked off and annoyed him, now she heard praise and pride for his team. "Oh, Dad," Eva said one day, smiling. "I'm so glad you've changed like this. If it weren't for you, my daughter, and Hector, I would have remained a gloomy and grumpy tyrant." Orizio hugged his daughter. "You both managed to make me change, and I am immensely grateful for that. Mom would be proud of you, Dad." Eva kissed her father on the cheek. "I'm sure she's looking down on us from heaven and smiling." "I have no doubt," replied the man. "Will Hector join us for dinner, dear?" Gabriella asked, preparing once again to cook something from her famous dishes that everyone loved. "Of course." Eva's face lit up with a smile. Orizio was glad that Hector had remained in their lives. Every time the young man came over, he couldn't help but be happy that his daughter had found such a man. However, this evening was different. Hector, as always, didn't come empty-handed, and dinner itself didn't proceed as usual. At one point, Hector glanced at Eva, smiling, and they both blushed. Orizio already suspected that the two had some good news to announce, but he wasn't prepared for what he would hear next. "Orizio, Gabriella." Hector's smile widened. "We have news for you." Eva seemed eager to speak, but Hector gently squeezed her hand, and she silently waited for her moment. "But first, Orizio, I would like to formally ask for your daughter's hand." Hector saw the smile light up the face of his former boss and knew his answer. Orizio jumped up and rushed to the young man, embracing him tightly. "My God! Yes! Yes, 1,000 times yes!" Orizio exclaimed, holding him in his arms. "I couldn't dream of a better son-in-law." Eva laughed, raising her hand, on the ring finger of which shone a beautiful engagement ring. Orizio was immensely moved by this news. They had a magnificent wedding. Orizio spared no expense, paying for everything, including a luxurious honeymoon on the islands. During the celebration, Orizio gave a speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Today, we celebrate the union of my dear beautiful daughter, Eva, and the most wonderful young man with the purest soul, who is not only worthy of her, but also helped me become a better person. I couldn't dream of a better son-in-law. I thank God for sending me not only trials, but also this angel in the flesh, who saved both me and my beloved daughter. This wonderful man showed me what it means to be kind and compassionate towards others' sorrows. If it weren't for him, I might have despaired, but his helping hand came just in time. Thank you, Hector, for everything you've done and for loving my daughter. The celebration was lavish and lively. Orizio was even prouder of his daughter than ever before, rejoicing that she had found love in the person who had literally saved her life. He no longer feared the future, knowing now that they could overcome any trials that might arise. Without a doubt, Hector and Eva were a couple blessed by angels and God in heaven. It couldn't have been otherwise.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick, is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.